right. How are you today? Welcome to Lunch and Learn. This is all about artificial intelligence, and it's an introduction. It's a little bit different than maybe one that you've been to with me before, because we are on safari today. Isn't that exciting? You can tell. But this is a way that we're going to be able to get started. We'll have a series, a three-part series about artificial intelligence, where we're going to talk about what is it, we're going to talk about ways that you can use it and ways that you can evaluate it as well. And we'll jump right into that today. The way we'll start is we're going to begin our journey today with choices and a little bit of an activity. So I'd like you to think for just a moment about a way that you've interacted with AI lately, with artificial intelligence lately. So think about any apps or websites or devices that you've used. Go ahead and post your response in the chat and feel free to unmute if you'd rather say it.
Asking some questions to ChatGPT.
Terrific. So Jack has interacted with ChatGPT. Allie said she's done some brainstorming with ChatGPT. Oh, Celeste has used some Grammarly too. Yeah. And even ChatGPT in class. Brian has used it to explain words or phrases that he wasn't sure of to get some better ideas. And we've seen that Kelly has ChatGPT or smaller versions of word choice and narratives. Terrific. And Celeste, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you've used it in class?
Sure. In business law, students have to do a research paper on a law case, and they have to discuss they have to summarize it. They have to come up with the issues, the law issues, the judge's decision, and then the reasoning behind that decision. And then they have to give their opinion of it based on what they know. So, but I just picked a case and I said, let's see how ChatGPT does, because they're coming up on a draft. They have to submit a draft. Let's see how ChatGPT summarizes this case. So I just picked a case and I typed it in ChatGPT, and I didn't like really drill down or anything, but what came up, the students were like, oh, well, that's not right. So it was good.
Excellent, excellent. And I am glad that they were able to see that ChatGPT can make mistakes, that it didn't quite do it the right way that it needed to be done.
It was a good, be careful moment.
Yes, that cautionary tale. Terrific. And I do see also ChatGPT for review questions at the end of class. Jennifer, would you mind telling us how you did that?
I'm actually driving right now, so no.
Oh, well, okay, never mind then. We don't want to task extra. Okay. And Alice said she used ChatGPT for planning a trip as well.
Yes. I was trying to see if I could plan a New Year's Eve trip. So I was using ChatGPT because I was trying to map out a couple of things and just seeing what was available. I've used ChatGPT for trip planning, and it's very useful because you can ask the specific questions.
Excellent. So if you needed any ideas of what's in it for me for ChatGPT, there's another way you can use it even in personal life. Terrific. Thank you so much, Alice. Thank you. Here are some examples too, in case you were trying to think of ideas. Have you used Siri to set an alarm, or Alexa? Those are examples of how you might have used some artificial intelligence. I know I've done that. Or Netflix sometimes recommends a show for you based upon your viewing habit. Or you might have received an auto response from a chatbot. For instance, I was interacting with Amazon, or almost anywhere that you are chatting, you are probably starting off with a chatbot. You can often get transferred to a real person. I say often because I don't think you always are, but but it'll often start you with that chatbot, then tries to direct you to the right department. and eventually lets you through that gate. But yeah, and Allie said that she's even had that with Kohl's. So being able to have it with some different places, those are ways that you've interacted with artificial intelligence. And even if you've performed a simple Google search that has tried to predict what you were trying to look for after you wrote a couple of words, that's even an example of artificial intelligence. Well, today I would like to welcome you to the world of artificial intelligence. We are going to embark on a journey with AI as our destination. And as we move forward, we'll make several sightseeing stops where we'll explore various landscapes and represent key concepts in artificial intelligence. And together we'll understand what AI is, how it can help you as educators, and how you can guide your students to use it ethically. We'll start those conversations. I'm Laura Thompson, and I did use Canva AI to create this image here. Asked it to create a brunette tour guide, and it just happened to look a little bit like me. So I thought that was fun. But you can find some interesting things. We're going to start off again talking about what is AI. We're going to get to some landmarks, including the benefits and ethics, and then we'll do a little reflection at the end. So we'll start off here. We're defining artificial intelligence, and our first stop is the gate of understanding. And we want to answer the question, what is artificial intelligence? Well, AI is like a machine brain. It's the ability of that computer to perform tasks that typically would require human intelligence, but it can perform tasks such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and even language translation. But the key point here to remember is that AI mimics human capabilities, but it can only do that by processing vast amount of data that exist. It recognizes patterns. It makes decisions that are based upon that data. So it doesn't create, it's not creative. It will feel like it can create things. It can make a new story for you, but it's not creative in its functioning. And you'll hear me say that a few times because I'm just trying to drive that home. So one of the things to think about for artificial intelligence is machine learning. And as we continue on our journey, this is our next landmark. Machine learning is a specific subset of artificial intelligence, and it focuses on giving machines that ability to learn from data without being explicitly programmed for everything that it does. So we're going to think about machine learning as the fuel that allows the AI engine to run, and it can adjust and it can improve over time. Some of this makes me a little bit weary, thinking about Terminator, things like that, the machines taking over. But machine learning, it uses algorithms to analyze your data, detect patterns, and adjust behavior to get better at specific tasks. One of the things that when I've worked with Kelly before on nursing kinds of things, we had looked at how artificial intelligence can analyze a lot of medical data, for instance, to begin to help look at patterns that might occur geographically for a certain disease or disorder, or that we might look at symptoms and see a pattern from a medicine that's there, or being able to analyze X-rays for those barely perceptible indications that might serve as red flags for us that we need to do a further diagnostic. Then we have large language models, and it's our next stop. And imagine this as a towering structure because it's a huge library that a large language model, an LLM, can access. Now, large language models are trained on vast amounts of text data. This allows them to understand, generate, and manipulate human language. One of those is ChatGPT, for instance. And it looks at the context of words, how we've put them together, and it tries to provide coherent responses in a natural language. They are valuable tools for content creation. We talked about how we use those a couple times already today. It also can be used for tutoring purposes and language-based tasks. But again, AI can create, but it is not creative. I was just reading an article. This was kind of interesting, really. This author was using AI to help support the writing of their books. However, it wasn't one of those things that we've heard a lot about where people say, oh, I'm going to have AI write my ebook and then I'm just going to publish it. Because when this author read a chapter, a sample chapter that AI had created, he felt that it was flat, that it didn't have any of the dynamic dialogue or character development in it that he would feel was a better example of writing. However, ChatGPT could be used to help develop a character with appropriate prompting, and then he could use that character in writing with his developed skills as an author. So he saw how it could support his writing, but it couldn't replace him as a writer. And that's why I keep underlining that AI is not creative. It still needs the human side of us in order to help make sure that it is correct, it's accurate, and that it's providing good information. So now we've talked about machine learning, large language models, and we're going to talk about neural networks. This is the heart of AI. They're neural networks, and it's inspired by the human brain. Now, I know that's a little bit of a mixed metaphor there, heart and brain, but I think you kind of get it, that it's a central aspect for artificial intelligence the way that we have it now. These networks are made up of layers of algorithms that allow machines to process information and to learn. Each layer is designed to interpret different aspects of the data, helping AI to solve complex tasks. So if you look at the image on the screen, for instance, or if you imagine a city, that it would have all of those buildings, and you can see how cars, you can go many different directions to be able to get where you want to go. But each route that you take, you'll have maybe a little bit of different scenery, you'll encounter different people or different wildlife on the way. So you'll see how you can pick up new ideas as you're examining these different neural networks. But neural networks are critical to machine learning and to AI tasks when you want to start doing image recognition. I mentioned those X-rays. If you want to think about speech processing, because think about how much more complex this is, and being able to do some predictive analytics. All right, so we've just had a lot of information. So we're going to camp just for a little bit. We're going to take this time to process the information we had while we sit around our campfire and we're enjoying the s'mores on the safari. I'm going to describe to you 3 different scenarios or tools in the chat. Your answer to these scenarios will be either machine learning, ML, the first one, large language models, LLM, the second one, or neural networks, NN, the third one. All right, so here we go. The first scenario is thinking about a system that categorizes email as either spam or not spam based upon past behavior. Do you think that's machine learning, large language model, or neural network? You can pop it in the chat or feel free to unmute. I'm seeing lots of machine learnings and O1s, MLs. Excellent. And if you said that, or if you thought machine learning, ding, 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 you got it right. This is indeed an example of machine learning, thinking about past behavior, and now we're categorizing things. All right, here's our next scenario. And watch as our marshmallow gets just a little more cooked here. A model that recognizes faces and photos by processing visual data. Machine learning, large language model, or neural networks. This one might be trickier. I see an answer in the chat. I feel like it could be multiple things. We do recognize how some of these things might interact. See if you can choose one that you think is most like it. the best answer. Excellent. And I see neural networks showing up in the chat. And that is the correct answer. Ding, 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 ding. Because if you're thinking, wow, this is a more complex task, we really have to think about how could this software recognize faces in photos by processing this visual data. They do need to have neural networks, that it's more complex. We talked about that speech recognition, visual recognizing pieces in an image. Terrific. All right, here we go. Last one. Our marshmallow's on fire. Oh no. A chatbot that generates responses based on extensive language data. Do you see the clue in there? Did it give it away? Absolutely. Yeah, these are definitely your large language model, your LLMs, your chat GPTs. Terrific. All right, everyone feel rested? Did you get a little marshmallow and some chocolate maybe? All right, here we go. Now we're going to move on. We're going to talk about the benefits of AI for educators. As we journey further, we want to take a moment to admire these benefits. AI can help educators streamline their work in multiple ways. It can help reduce your load on some mundane tasks. But I'm going to caution you, you don't want to try to use AI for those tasks that really need you. So for instance, you could use it for grading. Grading can become less time consuming if you use AI. Here's some examples of how you might do that. Some people might have used SimNet in the room, for instance, or might have used another third-party vendor that works with D2L's Brightspace. It's an activity or it's different assessments the students take, and the computer grades it for you and gives students feedback so that they can improve their performance. Those are ways that can happen. In fact, you can even do that right inside of D2L's Brightspace. If you have a multiple choice or a short answer question, something like that, the computer grades for you. That's an example of artificial intelligence being able to grade it for you and provide some feedback right away for your students. However, you might have noticed with written responses, you need to grade those because it's still complex enough that we want the educator to be able to, I mean, in general, would like educators to be able to be more involved in those answers, to recognize the nuances of the language, to recognize how feedback could be given to students to improve their performance. We looked at content that can be tailored to individual student needs. This was, for instance, those examples, I've used it to create scenarios in a course. And I might have wanted 3 different scenarios that were, how would you be able to diagnose obsessive compulsive disorder? But if we have 3 different ways, then I can separate my class into cohorts and they can have 3 different examples and recognize how many different ways obsessive compulsive disorder could present itself. Again, if I'm using it to create those scenarios, I have to read them over and make sure that it's right and make sure that it's accurate, because I'm still responsible for what is put into my class. So I do want to review those and make sure it's right. I've also used ChatGPT to try to adjust a reading level, for instance, for an article, so that, or to summarize an article, to help help students get information in more than one way. So these are a couple different ways. And another way that artificial intelligence is useful is in tutoring systems. And again, some of these are those third-party systems. I have seen some literature about using ChatGPT to create a tutor, and that students could use that as a tutor. I'm nervous about it only because we've talked about how ChatGPT can make up information and it won't always be the most accurate information. So that makes me a little bit nervous. However, there is a program that's called Poe that some individuals are using, but I don't have a lot of experience with it. But it's a way that you can give it the information and create a chatbot that can, when students pose questions, it only pulls it from that database. Remember, we talked about large language models being trained on certain databases. That would be the information it was given. my caution about that is make sure whatever information you give to that chatbot is in fact yours to give. So you want to make sure that it's something that's free and accessible, that it's okay, that you'd have the rights to be able to give that information to the chatbot. Does anyone in here have examples of how they've used it that I haven't mentioned, or that could give a little more information about grading content or tutoring that they've been able to use artificial intelligence? Not yet? Okay. All right, let's think about this ethical use, because we need to pause to reflect at this ethical crossroad. As educators, it's important to not only use AI to your advantage, but also teach students how to use it responsibly. Because this means that you need to be transparent about when and how AI tools were used. And that way you can also encourage students to critically evaluate the AI outputs. When Celeste did that sample analysis, right? She helped her students become critical evaluators of those AI outputs to recognize, oh, in that situation, it didn't do a good job. And they were able to take it apart and talk about how it could be better. Some examples, if you do something like that, students are sometimes more likely to really tear apart the ChatGPT created example because they don't feel like they're hurting anyone's feelings. If they think that it's your example as the instructor, or they think it's a peer's example, sometimes it's harder. But when they think it's, oh, it's just a robot, we can go ahead, we can tear this apart, they have less reluctance to do that. A key point, though, is if you want to try to incorporate AI literacy into your curriculum, and help students understand that even though AI can be powerful, it can come with limitations and biases. And we talked about, for instance, those large language models being trained on a database. Well, ChatGPT is trained on the internet. However, it's still susceptible to any biases that are being expressed in a large quantity on the internet. For instance, right now, all the political conversations that would be had, that depending upon which one is represented more, ChatGPT might develop a bias towards one party or the other, or the language that it used might be biased towards one policy or another. So it's recognizing that it's only as powerful as its database, and recognizing that there are limitations and biases that we could run into. And you want to consider, how can you guide your students in their own AI use? Now, I know this is a touchy subject, but if they're going to use it, you want to talk to them about being cautious and not overly reliant upon AI for their decision making or creating their assignments. You want to remind them that AI is a tool, that it augments their thinking, but it can't replace their thinking. So some of the things that I've shared with my students before is reminding them that AI makes things up, and that if you turn in an assignment with something that's made up in it, you're responsible for that made up result. And you either come clean and say, well, ChatGPT wrote it for me, but even then, I mean, what does that do for you? Really, I didn't do the assignment at all anyway, right? So they need to be able to look at anything. For instance, AI might be a good tool to use for that first outline or generating a paragraph for a draft, but recognizing that that can't be what is submitted because it can't replace the critical thinking of the student. But these are difficult conversations to have. They really are. We want to teach students to question those AI generated outputs, to evaluate the sources of the information, and understand the ethical implications of using AI in academia. The other reason we want to have these conversations also is because in so many industries, AI is pervasive, and helping them recognize the ethical use of AI in any of those other industries as well. So it's not just in writing English papers, it's also in other forms of industry as well. So we'll just take one moment at a scenic overlook to consider both those benefits and limitations of AI. It's excellent at handling repetitive tasks, processing large data sets, and providing instant feedback, but AI tools can lack human judgment and creativity. They can reflect biases present in their training data, just like what we've talked about so far. And again, even with that early example that I talked about using AI to help present red flags in medical data, we still need those human doctors and nurses and other health professional scientists to really interpret that information that we're given to decide, okay, what are the next steps? But here's a photo op. We've got some little sheep here, lambs. While we stop to take these pictures, think for just a moment, how could AI be useful for you? Professionally, personally, maybe you're designing your next New Year's Eve trip. Maybe you're thinking about, I need another scenario to use in my course. How could this be useful for you? Definitely with lesson planning, example questions, test writing, terrific. And Brian, again, I caution, just make sure you're reading over, right? To make sure that whatever AI has generated for those questions, that it, and those answers, that it's right. You have photo editing. Isn't it amazing what you can do with creating those photos? And Kathy, I think you might have been in those examples. I used AI to generate a nurse with a computer, right? And one of them had an old-fashioned kind of cap on their head. But then if I said a diverse nurse, then that's when they gave me someone of color with a laptop. They updated the whole thing. It was really interesting, the word choice that you put into the image generator and what it would show for you. Travel, course design, generating those interesting images. And I do see a question from Tatiana earlier also. Is there a way instructors can check to see if a student used AI for an assignment, copy paste? I know some people use, there's a program called Zero GPT, and that is something that can be used, but nothing is fail safe, Tatiana. Nothing is fail safe. So even if it shows up, and at one point in time, our, oh goodness, Turnitin had an AI feature on it, right? But nothing's fail safe. It only generates those conversations. So it's the same thing as before. If you thought that a student plagiarized something, it really begins that conversation where you can talk to the student. In some of the nursing presentations that we've done, we looked at different reasons that students might plagiarize, is the strong word, but because sometimes in certain cultures, it's considered a compliment to use the words of someone who you think is more learned than you are. So it could be a cultural thing. It could be a language thing, that their comfort with English is not quite there. And so they feel that this says it better than they ever could. But helping them, I have a student who I worked with her and said, I would rather hear what you have to say than what Grammarly has to say, because it put a word like dearth in there, a dearth of information. I didn't use dearth until I wrote my PhD, and I haven't used it since. So I'm thinking to myself, these are words that Grammarly puts in there that are lovely words, but it just wasn't appropriate. And it wasn't really even appropriate for what was being written at the time anyway. So I helped convince her that she could write and it would be okay, that I would be able to understand what she was doing. I'm also not an English professor, so it's a little bit different there as well. So thinking about what polish do you need? And so nothing's foolproof though. So there are tools out there, you'll be able to research and find tools, but even if it says, oh, this is 90% AI generated, it's not necessarily accurate then either. So it's recognizing that. And I'm not telling my students this, but there's certain paraphrasing programs out there that if I take my ChatGPT generated thing, I stick it in this paraphraser, then I give it to you, it won't show up as AI generated anymore. And some of those tools like Zero GPT, they are programmed for the certain background information. Some programming is beyond me. I'm not quite there, understanding exactly how you read all of these algorithm kind of things, but it can recognize patterns in it, things like that. But if they used a different AI generator, and there are several out there, that it won't pick that up either. So it's a conversation starter, but I wouldn't want you to use and say, oh, that's it, you cheated, and because it's a conversation starter. I'm just trying to see if I caught any other question. Does the college have an AI policy? What you're being directed towards is that academic dishonesty policy. And if you look at it, and we really look at the words, you can see in there that those it can be applied to many of these AI situations that we might have. Okay, good. All right. Now, here's the tough question, right? What would be acceptable student uses of AI for your course even, or in general? How do you think it would be okay if they used AI? To review their own work and make suggestions. To help get words, maybe they need some words. Brainstorming, outlines, defining terms. Yeah, if it's a word that they didn't really understand. Brainstorming. Perfect. And I like that first draft idea. I liked Celeste's idea that, maybe the student uses it to create a summary, but then they read it critically to really see what's right. I know sometimes I check sources in my class that I teach, and it's not a gotcha kind of thing. It's more like, wow, this looks like a really interesting source. So sometimes I end up checking sources just because I'd be interested in it. But yeah, these are good ways that students could use AI. For some other ideas for AI, again, those first drafts are possible, creating those outlines, maybe even creating a scenario that they need. Depends on what your course is and what your purpose is. And we'll talk more about that in our AI series. So when you are thinking about AI, an AI tool, these are some questions you want to ask yourself. What type of artificial intelligence is this? And you might not always have that answer, but it's good to start thinking about, okay, what is the purpose of this tool? What is supposed to be accomplished by this? And is it a large language model? Is it more of a neural network? Now that you have some of that foundation in there, you might be able to make some of those decisions, make some of those conclusions, draw some of those conclusions. And what was it designed to do? So you really want to make sure that the tool is appropriate to the task. And we're going to talk more about that too in our series, but you might use, say, perplexity.ai instead of ChatGPT, or you might use Claude, C-L-A-U-D-E, instead of another tool. They each have their strengths. They each have different things that they can accomplish for you in a different way. We'll talk about that more. If you have questions about any of those ones I mentioned, feel free to email me also, and we'll talk more about them. But it's recognizing kind of that strategic use. Also, what database does this AI tool use? So thinking about, was this trained broadly? Was it trained only on business materials? So it's perfect for my class, right, Celeste? Was this trained, where does it get its information from which it's drawing this? And what would this tool not be useful for? So there's certain times that when we look at these tools, we say, yeah, this isn't great. Or even still, when we use something like Canva or some other generator tool for images, that the hands will end up with 7 fingers, things like that. So thinking about when is it useful, when is it not useful? So now our journey has come full circle. You've explored the landscapes of artificial intelligence. You've learned key terms like machine learning, large language model, neural network. You've considered how AI might be a valuable addition to your teaching practice professionally and maybe even for your students. And we finished, keep in mind that AI is a tool. It's one that when it's used wisely, it can enhance education, but it always requires that careful thought and ethical consideration. All right. But I would like to say thank you. And I'd like to give you just a little bit input. You might have noticed I had a few different pictures. Canva created 4 pictures for me. These are the 4 pictures that it created. And then I asked it to create some more. So these are more that it created. But I did want to show you, I actually created the outline for this presentation using artificial intelligence. So I popped into ChatGPT this prompt and got it to give me an outline. And then I was able to edit it, massage it, put my style into it, put different terms into it that I felt would be useful for my cohort, my audience here. So this lets you know, you can set it up with who you are. This is a professional development specialist with 20 years of experience. And I wanted a 35-minute presentation. Hey, pretty good, right? And being able, and I thought I'd love to take a journey. So I asked it to write a metaphorical journey with sightseeing stops, things like that. But this gives you an idea of what was behind the scenes. Because I'm being transparent.
No, but it's great. It's great. Love it.
Any thoughts or questions at all?
And that was all on ChatGPT, right?
Yeah, I typed this prompt into ChatGPT, and then like I said, I massaged it, I edited it. It had some things in there I didn't like, and then it had some things in there that I did like and I kept. But yeah. And then Canva was the one I used for the image, but it was only create a safari tour guide, a brunette safari tour guide, because I wanted to look a little bit like me. It gave me blondes first, Celeste. It looked a lot like you.
Right, but thanks. Yeah, I've seen those images though all over you know, like X and LinkedIn, and so everybody's, you know, remember when what were the emojis, not emojis, but the Bitmojis.
Emojis, yeah.
Yeah, so these are gonna be all the rage.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And I still use Bitmojis sometimes too, but I didn't get a Bitmoji with a safari hat, so.
So with Canvas, you just is that like a website or is that an
Yeah,
app or
so it's Canva, Canva. And of course, there are tiers, right, for different levels, but the free version, you can do a lot with the free version. It will show you that you can't access every image, but you can still do a lot with the free version.
and it works the same way with AI, so you tell it kind of like what you want and it generates something?
Yeah, it can create images for you and they're free. Yeah. And it
Thank you.
generally creates 4 at a time. So you can choose the one that you like the best. And in general, with AI, the better your prompt, the more clear your prompt, the better the image you'll get. And the better the writing you'll get, or the better the rubric you'll get. Because you can use this to make rubrics too. ChatGPT will make rubrics for your assignments and you massage them and make them right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you're a coder, apparently it's really great for coding. It's not sophisticated, but it gives good basic coding. Yeah. Excellent. Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate you.